"Ma'am, I do not think this account belongs to you." The words echoed across the quiet bank lobby so clearly that several customers looked up from their phones. For a moment, even the steady hum of counting machines seemed to fade into the background. Ariel Vaughn stood at the polished service counter, one hand resting lightly on a withdrawal slip requesting $50,000. She did not react immediately. Sunlight streamed through the tall front windows of the downtown Charlotte branch, casting long reflections across the marble floor. Behind the counter, Brianna Holloway adjusted her name badge and stared at the screen in front of her. Her expression carried the confidence of someone who believed she had already figured out the entire situation. Ariel's dark blazer was simple. Her handbag showed signs of years of use. There were no designer logos, no expensive jewelry, no obvious symbols of wealth. To Brianna, that was enough. "There must be some mistake," she continued, her voice slightly louder than necessary. Several people waiting in line exchanged curious glances. Ariel remained calm. "There is no mistake," she said gently. "I would simply like to make the withdrawal." Brianna folded her arms. $50,000 is not a routine transaction. The words hung in the air. A man sitting near the loan office lowered his newspaper. An elderly woman waiting for customer service stopped filling out paperwork. The atmosphere in the branch shifted almost instantly. Ariel noticed the attention but did not seem embarrassed. If anything, her composure only made Brianna more certain that something was wrong. What nobody in the lobby realized was that within the next few minutes, an entire branch would be forced to confront a painful lesson about assumptions. A routine banking transaction would become the most talked about moment of the month. One employee would wish she had chosen different words. One executive would leave an important meeting and hurry downstairs faster than anyone had ever seen before. And dozens of customers would witness a truth that could not be ignored once it came into the light. If stories about dignity, justice, and unexpected revelations inspire you, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are watching from today. Because what happened inside this bank started with a simple request and ended with a lesson worth far more than $50,000. 30 minutes earlier, Ariel Vaughn stepped out of a rideshare vehicle beneath a bright Carolina sky and walked toward the bank entrance with no idea that before the morning was over, an entire room full of strangers would discover exactly who she was. 30 minutes earlier, the morning sun hung bright above Charlotte as Ariel Vaughn stepped onto the sidewalk outside the bank. The glass entrance reflected the blue Carolina sky, passing traffic and pedestrians carrying coffee cups toward nearby office buildings. Ariel paused for a moment before walking inside. She had always liked quiet mornings. They reminded her of the years before success arrived, when every day began with uncertainty and determination. Her reflection appeared briefly in the glass doors. A simple dark blazer, comfortable shoes, a leather handbag she had carried for years. Nothing about her appearance suggested executive offices, board meetings, or corporate leadership. That never bothered her. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood outside Raleigh had taught her something valuable. Character lasted longer than appearances. Status came and went. Integrity remained. The cool air of the bank lobby greeted her as she entered. Customers moved through the branch at an unhurried pace. A young father helped his daughter fill out a savings deposit slip. An elderly couple sat near the customer service offices discussing paperwork. Somewhere deeper in the building, a counting machine clicked rhythmically behind closed doors. Everything felt ordinary, exactly the way Ariel preferred it. Her phone vibrated softly inside her handbag. A message appeared from her chief operations officer. "The community center purchase closes this afternoon. Everything ready?" Ariel smiled. That was the reason for today's withdrawal. A new community center on the east side of the city had finally become available after months of negotiations. The property would provide classrooms, job training facilities, and youth programs for families who had spent years waiting for opportunities larger organizations ignored. The purchase represented far more than a real estate transaction. It represented hope. Ariel typed a quick reply. "Everything is on schedule. See you this afternoon." She slipped the phone away and continued toward the service counters. Several customers glanced at her briefly before returning to their own business. Nobody recognized her. That was not unusual. While Vanguard Community Technologies had become one of the fastest-growing social impact companies in the region, Ariel rarely appeared in advertisements or interviews. She preferred investing in communities rather than promoting herself. Recognition never interested her. Results did. Sunlight poured through the front windows and stretched across the polished floor as she approached the teller stations. Behind one counter stood Brianna Holloway. Young, confident, and impeccably dressed, she greeted customers with practiced efficiency. Years working in banking had convinced her she could identify people almost instantly. Wealth, education, importance, trustworthiness. She believed she could see those things before a customer ever spoke. As Ariel joined the short line, Brianna looked up briefly. Their eyes met for less than a second. Yet in that second something subtle happened. A judgment formed. An assumption settled into place. Brianna immediately returned her attention to another transaction, but the impression remained. Ariel never noticed. She was focused on the withdrawal paperwork resting neatly inside her handbag. Outside, traffic moved steadily through the city. Inside, another ordinary banking day continued. Nobody in the building realized that a simple glance had already set an entire chain of events into motion. Within the next half hour, assumptions would collide with reality, and a room full of strangers would learn that the most expensive mistakes often begin with the smallest judgments. Brianna Holloway believed experience had given her a special ability. After 6 years behind a bank counter, she often told coworkers she could identify important clients before they even reached her station. Wealth left clues, she claimed. Expensive watches, designer handbags, tailored clothing, confident body language, luxury vehicles parked outside. Over time, that belief became something more dangerous. It became certainty. As the line moved forward, Brianna processed transactions with practiced speed. Deposit slips, cashier's checks, account questions. Everything followed a predictable rhythm. She enjoyed that rhythm because it reinforced the feeling that she understood the world around her. To Brianna, people fit categories. Some customers arrived carrying influence and authority. Others arrived needing assistance. The problem was that she often decided which category someone belonged in long before she knew anything about them. Across the lobby, sunlight spilled across polished tile and reflected from glass office doors. The branch manager's office stood near the rear of the building. Financial advisors met with clients behind frosted partitions. A digital screen near the entrance displayed investment information and community announcements. The entire branch projected stability and trust. Brianna took pride in being part of it. When Ariel finally stepped forward, Brianna noticed the same details she had observed earlier. The practical blazer, the worn leather handbag, the absence of visible luxury. Her eyes moved quickly and unconsciously, gathering evidence to support a conclusion she had already reached. Ariel offered a warm smile. "Good morning." Brianna returned a polite version of one. "Good morning. How may I help you?" Ariel handed over the completed withdrawal form. Brianna glanced down, then looked again. $50,000. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. The amount immediately collided with the image she had already created in her mind. She looked back up at Ariel. "May I see identification?" Ariel nodded and reached into her handbag. Everything remained perfectly normal so far. Yet Brianna felt a growing skepticism she could not explain. Around them, customers continued their conversations. Someone laughed softly near the customer service area. A printer hummed behind the counter. The ordinary sounds of a busy bank continued uninterrupted. Brianna entered account information into her computer and waited for the system to load. The account appeared. The balance was more than sufficient. The withdrawal presented no technical problem whatsoever. Still, the information on the screen did not align with the assumptions in her head. That contradiction bothered her. Ariel stood patiently, completely unaware of the internal debate taking place behind the counter. She had spent years encountering moments like this. Sometimes people expected success to look a certain way. Sometimes they expected leadership to have a different face. Yet she rarely challenged those expectations directly. Experience had taught her that character revealed itself naturally if given enough time. Brianna studied the account details once more. Everything appeared legitimate. Every verification field matched. Every security indicator showed green. Yet instead of feeling reassured, she became more suspicious. Her confidence in her own judgment remained stronger than the information displayed in front of her. She glanced at Ariel again. Calm posture. Relaxed expression. No sign of nervousness. Somehow that confidence made Brianna even more convinced that she needed to look deeper. She leaned slightly closer to the monitor and made a decision. A decision that seemed small in the moment. A decision she believed was protecting the bank. But within minutes, it would become the beginning of a mistake she would never forget. Brianna folded her hands on the counter and forced a professional smile that felt colder than the air-conditioned lobby around them. I am going to need additional verification before I can process this request. Ariel nodded politely. What kind of verification? Brianna clicked through several screens on her computer. The account remained fully active. The balance remained more than sufficient. Every security check continued to pass. Yet she kept searching for something that would justify the doubt growing in her mind. This is a significant withdrawal, Brianna said. We need to be very careful. Ariel remained calm. Of course. The answer was simple, respectful, reasonable. Somehow that only irritated Brianna further. Most customers became frustrated when delays appeared. Most argued. Ariel did neither. She simply waited. Behind her, the line began growing longer. A businessman glanced at his watch. An elderly woman shifted her purse from one shoulder to the other. The ordinary rhythm of the branch continued, but more people were beginning to pay attention. Brianna examined the identification card Ariel had provided. The photograph matched perfectly. The signature matched. The account information matched. Nothing suggested fraud. Nothing suggested a problem. Yet Brianna could not let go of the conclusion she had formed within the first few seconds of seeing her. Have you made a withdrawal of this size before? She asked. Ariel blinked once. Yes. At this branch. Not always. Brianna leaned back slightly. I see. The response revealed nothing unusual, but she treated it as though it did. The man waiting behind Ariel glanced toward the counter. The atmosphere was becoming uncomfortable. Even some employees nearby had begun noticing the unusual amount of time being spent on a routine transaction. Ariel rested one hand lightly on the polished counter. The sunlight from the front windows reflected across the marble floor and illuminated tiny dust particles drifting through the air. Everything around her felt strangely familiar. Not the bank itself, the situation, the feeling of being questioned beyond reason, the subtle suggestion that she did not belong where she stood. Years earlier, moments like this would have made her angry. Over time, she had learned something better. Patience often revealed more than confrontation ever could. Brianna clicked another screen, then another. Finally, she looked up. I am still not comfortable approving this transaction. Several customers nearby exchanged glances. Ariel's expression never changed. May I ask why? The question was asked gently, without accusation, without hostility. That made it harder for Brianna to answer. Because the truth was that she did not have a legitimate reason. The account was valid. The identification was valid. The withdrawal request was valid. What remained was not evidence. It was assumption. Yet Brianna could not admit that. There are simply certain situations that require additional caution, she replied. The answer sounded official enough to satisfy someone unfamiliar with banking procedures. Ariel was not unfamiliar. She recognized the difference immediately. Still, she chose not to challenge it. The silence between them lingered for a moment. Around the branch, conversations softened. People sensed tension even if they did not understand its source. Then Brianna made another decision. She reached for a verification form and slid it across the counter. I would like you to complete this before we continue. Ariel looked down at the document. It was a form rarely required under circumstances like these. Slowly, she lifted her eyes back toward Brianna. For the first time that morning, something shifted in the air between them, and several customers waiting nearby began to realize that this was no longer just a banking transaction. Something else was unfolding. Ariel looked down at the verification form resting on the polished counter. The paper itself was ordinary. The meaning behind it was not. She recognized the procedure immediately. In situations like this, the form was typically reserved for transactions that triggered specific security concerns. Her account had triggered none. She knew that because she had spent years managing corporate finances involving amounts far larger than $50,000. Slowly, she picked up the form and examined it. Around her, the atmosphere inside the branch had changed. Customers who had been focused on their own business were now quietly observing. A businessman near the back of the line folded his arms. The elderly woman waiting for customer service stopped pretending to read a brochure. Even a young employee working another station glanced over before quickly looking away. Brianna noticed the attention but interpreted it differently. To her, the growing audience confirmed that she was protecting the bank from a potentially suspicious transaction. Confidence settled deeper into her posture. "I apologize for the inconvenience," she said, though her tone suggested no real apology. "These precautions exist for a reason." Ariel met her eyes. "I agree." The response caught Brianna slightly off guard. "You do?" "Of course. Banks should be careful." Brianna nodded as though that proved her point. "Exactly." Ariel gently placed the form back on the counter. "The question is whether those precautions are being applied fairly." The words were spoken quietly, respectfully, yet they seemed to linger in the air long after she finished speaking. For a brief moment, Brianna had no answer. Behind them, the counting machine continued its steady rhythm somewhere beyond the secured offices. The sound seemed strangely loud now. Brianna straightened her shoulders. "I assure you, this has nothing to do with fairness." Ariel remained calm. "Then perhaps you could explain what specific concern exists." Another silence followed. The businessman waiting behind her shifted his weight slightly. Someone near the entrance looked toward the counter. Brianna opened a file on her screen. Then another. She searched for justification she could present aloud. Every result pointed to the same conclusion. Valid account. Valid identification. Sufficient funds. No security alerts. No restrictions. No irregular activity. The facts refused to support her suspicions. Yet she still trusted her instincts more than the evidence. "I am simply following procedure," she finally said. The answer sounded weaker than she intended. Ariel noticed. So did several customers listening nearby. The elderly woman slowly shook her head before returning her attention to the brochure in her lap. The atmosphere felt heavier now. Not because anyone was arguing. Because everyone could sense something uncomfortable unfolding. Brianna reached for Ariel's identification again. As she did, a small card partially slipped from a slot inside the leather wallet resting beside the paperwork. Neither woman noticed at first. The edge of the card caught the sunlight streaming through the front windows. Brianna's eyes moved toward it automatically. The visible portion displayed a corporate logo she vaguely recognized. Her hand paused. Ariel adjusted the wallet slightly, unaware that the card had become visible. Brianna leaned forward just enough to see another line of text. Something about it seemed familiar. Very familiar. A strange feeling touched the back of her mind. For the first time all morning, certainty began giving way to curiosity. Around the branch, customers continued watching in silence. Outside, traffic rolled steadily through the city. Inside, the moment hung suspended between assumption and discovery. And within seconds, one small piece of identification was about to change everything. Brianna could not stop looking at the edge of the card protruding from Ariel's wallet. The logo stirred a memory she could not immediately place. Somewhere in the back of her mind she had seen it before. Not on a customer's account. Not in a brochure. Somewhere bigger. More important. The sunlight reflecting through the front windows caught the metallic lettering again as Ariel adjusted a stack of paperwork. For a brief second, the card slipped farther into view. Brianna's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Vanguard Community Technologies. She knew that name. Nearly everyone in Charlotte's business community knew that name. Over the last several years, the company had funded community redevelopment projects, technology training centers, and educational initiatives throughout the region. Local newspapers covered their work regularly. Economic reports praised their impact. Even the bank itself had participated in financing partnerships connected to several of their projects. Brianna felt a small knot form in her stomach. She glanced back at her computer screen, then toward the card, then back at Ariel. For the first time all morning, doubt entered her certainty. One moment, she said quietly. Her voice sounded different now, less confident. Ariel nodded. Take your time. The calm response somehow made Brianna even more uncomfortable. She opened another internal banking screen and entered additional account information. The results appeared almost immediately. Her heartbeat quickened. The account was not simply active. It was connected to a major corporate relationship, several business accounts, multiple investment services, long-term institutional partnerships. Brianna stared at the screen. The information had been there the entire time. She simply had not looked closely enough because she believed she already knew the answer. Nearby, customers continued pretending not to watch while clearly watching everything. The businessman standing behind Ariel shifted slightly closer. The elderly woman lowered her brochure again. Even another teller across the branch seemed aware that something unusual was happening. Brianna swallowed. A small notification appeared on her screen recommending management approval because of the transaction size. Under normal circumstances, that step would have been routine. Today it felt different. Her fingers hesitated above the keyboard before she finally pressed the verification request. Upstairs, in a glass-walled office overlooking the branch floor, Regional President Colton Mercer sat reviewing quarterly reports with two senior managers. Sunlight spilled across polished wood furniture and framed certificates mounted on the walls. His phone vibrated quietly beside a stack of financial summaries. He glanced down. A standard transaction authorization request. $50,000. Corporate account. Nothing unusual. Then he saw the account holder's name. Colton stopped reading. The room suddenly felt quieter. One manager continued speaking about branch performance metrics before noticing Colton was no longer listening. Everything okay? Colton did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. Ariel Vaughn. He knew the name very well. In fact, he had attended 2 community investment conferences where she had been the keynote speaker. Their organizations had collaborated on charitable initiatives worth millions of dollars. He checked the request again to make sure he was not mistaken. The name remained exactly the same. Downstairs, Brianna waited for authorization while uncertainty spread through her thoughts. Across the counter, Ariel stood patiently beside the sunlight-filled window, completely composed despite the growing attention surrounding her transaction. Then, a few floors above the lobby, Colton pushed back his chair and stood up so quickly that both managers looked at him in surprise. Because one question had just entered his mind. If Ariel Vaughn was standing downstairs right now, why had this transaction been escalated in the first place? Colton Mercer was already moving before either manager could ask another question. The authorization request remained open on his phone as he crossed the office. Through the glass walls, employees looked up in surprise. Colton was known for being calm, methodical, and impossible to rush. Yet now his pace carried an urgency few people had ever witnessed. The elevator arrived within seconds. As the doors closed, he looked down at the account details again. Ariel Vaughn. The name alone should have prevented this transaction from ever becoming a problem. Not because she was important. Not because she was wealthy. Because she was one of the most respected business leaders in the state. Her company had transformed communities, partnered with financial institutions, and created opportunities for thousands of families. If she was standing at a teller station waiting for approval, something had gone wrong. Downstairs, Brianna remained frozen behind her terminal. The longer she reviewed the account information, the worse she felt. Every additional detail contradicted the assumptions she had made from the beginning. Multiple verified business accounts, long-standing banking relationships, significant deposits, outstanding professional credentials. The facts had been available from the moment she entered the account number. Brianna had simply chosen to trust her first impression instead. Across the counter, Ariel stood quietly beneath the sunlight pouring through the front windows. The leather wallet remained beside her paperwork. The partially visible identification card now rested fully exposed on the counter. Brianna finally looked at it clearly. Chief Executive Officer, Vanguard Community Technologies, Ariel Vaughn. Her stomach dropped. For several seconds she simply stared at the card. The words seemed impossible despite being right in front of her. Suddenly she remembered magazine articles, local business awards, community development reports, and televised interviews she had seen over the years. The woman standing in front of her had appeared in all of them. Not constantly, not in a celebrity way, but often enough that Brianna should have recognized her. The realization hit hard. The businessman waiting behind Ariel noticed the change in Brianna's expression. So did the elderly woman sitting nearby. Something had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Brianna slowly lifted her eyes. Ms. Vaughn. The confidence that had filled her voice earlier was gone. Ariel looked at her politely. Yes. Brianna opened her mouth but no words came out, because there was no professional explanation left. No procedure. No policy. No unresolved verification issue. Only the truth. Before she could say anything else, movement near the rear offices drew everyone's attention. The branch doors opened and Colton Mercer emerged from the secured hallway. Several employees immediately straightened. A few customers recognized him from local business events. Colton scanned the lobby once. His eyes landed on Ariel almost instantly. Relief crossed his face. Then concern. Then disbelief. He walked directly toward her. Conversations throughout the branch faded into silence. Even the printers seemed quieter. Ariel turned as he approached. A warm smile appeared on her face. Colton. He stopped in front of the counter. Ariel. The familiarity of the greeting sent another wave of realization through the room. Colton glanced at the paperwork. Then at Brianna. Then back at Ariel. Have you been waiting long? He asked. The question sounded simple. Yet everyone could hear the meaning beneath it. Ariel considered the question for a moment before answering. Longer than necessary. The branch fell completely silent. Brianna lowered her eyes. And in that silence, every assumption that had shaped the morning finally began to collapse. For several long seconds nobody spoke. The silence inside the branch felt heavier than any argument could have. Sunlight continued pouring through the tall front windows, casting bright reflections across the polished floor, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Colton looked from Ariel to the paperwork resting on the counter, and then toward Brianna. Years of leadership had taught him how to read a room quickly. He did not need an explanation to understand what had happened. The expressions alone told the story. Ariel remained composed. Brianna looked as though she wished the floor would open beneath her. Around them, customers and employees watched quietly, sensing the importance of the moment. Colton turned back toward Ariel. I am sorry, he said sincerely. This should never have happened. Ariel studied him for a moment before offering a small smile. I appreciate that. The simplicity of her response somehow made the apology feel even more meaningful. Colton nodded slowly. You have been one of the most respected partners this institution has ever worked with. More importantly, you deserve the same respect every customer deserves when they walk through our doors. Several employees lowered their eyes. The words were directed at everyone, not just Brianna. Ariel rested one hand lightly on the counter. Respect should not depend on who someone is, she said softly. It should be the starting point. The statement settled over the branch like sunlight. No accusation. No anger. Just truth. Brianna felt her throat tighten. Throughout the morning she had defended her decisions. She had justified them with procedures and caution. But standing there now, she could no longer hide from what had really happened. She had looked at Ariel and decided who she was before learning anything about her. Slowly, Brianna stepped away from her terminal. Ms. Vaughn, she said quietly. Ariel turned toward her. Brianna took a breath. I owe you an apology. The words were difficult, but they were honest. I made assumptions I should not have made. I convinced myself I was following procedure when the truth is that I stopped trusting the information in front of me because it did not match what I expected. Nobody interrupted. The branch remained silent. Brianna continued. You were patient with me when you had every reason not to be. I am sorry. Ariel looked at her for several seconds. The sunlight reflected softly from the counter between them. Outside, traffic moved steadily through the city. Life continued as normal beyond the glass walls. Yet inside the branch something important was happening. Accountability. Humility. Growth. Ariel finally smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not a victorious one. A kind smile. Thank you for saying that. Brianna nodded, relief and embarrassment mixing together. I understand if you are upset. Ariel shook her head gently. Being upset would not improve anything. Learning from it might. The word struck Brianna harder than criticism ever could have. Colton watched quietly. He had spent years managing businesses, budgets, and strategic partnerships, but he knew moments like this could change people far more than any training seminar. Ariel picked up her identification and placed it back inside her wallet. Then she glanced toward the withdrawal paperwork still waiting on the counter. I still need to purchase that community center this afternoon, she said with a small laugh. The tension that had filled the room all morning finally eased. A few customers smiled. Even Brianna managed a nervous laugh. Colton looked toward the terminal and nodded. Then let us make sure we do not keep the future waiting any longer. And for the first time since Ariel entered the branch, everyone in the room seemed to breathe again. 20 minutes later, the transaction was complete. The withdrawal had been processed without issue, exactly as it could have been from the very beginning. The envelope containing the certified funds rested securely inside Ariel's leather handbag as she prepared to leave the branch. The atmosphere inside the bank felt different now. Lighter. Quieter. Not because people had forgotten what happened, but because everyone understood it. Customers returned to their business. Employees resumed answering questions and processing transactions. The counting machines once again filled the background with their familiar rhythm. Yet beneath the normal activity, a lesson lingered in the air. Near the service counter, Brianna stood watching as Ariel organized her paperwork. She had replayed the morning in her mind several times already. The assumptions, the hesitation, the unnecessary barriers. Looking back, the warning signs seemed obvious. The information had been there from the start. The account, the identification, the verification results. Everything. The problem had never been a lack of evidence. It had been the decision to trust a first impression more than the facts. Ariel closed her handbag and looked up. Brianna stepped forward. I hope the community center purchase goes well. The words were sincere. Ariel smiled warmly. Thank you. A lot of families have been waiting a long time for it. Brianna nodded. I think they are lucky to have someone fighting for them. Ariel paused for a moment. Most people would do the same if given the opportunity. The answer reflected exactly who she was. Not someone interested in recognition. Not someone interested in proving a point. Simply someone who believed people deserve chances. Colton approached from the side and extended his hand. Ariel shook it. I appreciate your patience today, he said. And I appreciate your honesty, she replied. Colton glanced around the branch. Several employees were watching quietly from a distance. I think everyone learned something important. Ariel followed his gaze. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, illuminating the lobby in warm afternoon light. The customers who had witnessed the morning's events were gradually leaving, carrying their own impressions of what they had seen. Some lessons came from speeches. Others arrived unexpectedly during ordinary moments. This one would likely be remembered for years. Ariel turned toward the exit. The automatic doors opened as she approached. A soft autumn breeze greeted her the moment she stepped outside. The city moved around her exactly as it had before. Cars rolled through intersections. Pedestrians crossed busy sidewalks. Somewhere in the distance, construction crews worked on projects that would eventually shape new neighborhoods. Soon, one of those projects would include a community center that existed because she refused to let setbacks become excuses. Behind her, through the glass, Brianna stood near the counter watching the doors close. Not with embarrassment anymore. With reflection. Growth rarely felt comfortable, but it often began in moments exactly like this. Ariel walked down the sidewalk beneath a bright Carolina sky. The afternoon sun reflected from nearby buildings and cast long shadows across the street. She never looked back. She did not need validation. She did not need revenge. The transaction was finished. The lesson had been learned. And somewhere between assumption and understanding, something valuable had changed. The city carried on around her as though nothing remarkable had happened. Yet for everyone inside that branch, the memory would remain. Not because $50,000 changed hands, but because dignity had met prejudice, patience had met judgment, and kindness had chosen to leave the final word. As Ariel disappeared into the afternoon crowd, The sunlight continued shining through the bank windows behind her, and the quiet that followed felt less like silence and more like understanding.